Hi, and welcome. As always, I'm Abbie. This is Stories Lived, Stories Told, and here's my question for today. What is the impact of whiteness in my life? This is the same question I asked in part one, and the question remains as a good way to frame our own relationship to the content of part two of this conversation. Today, we continue our time with Diane Grimes and Liz Cooney, co-authors of the upcoming book, Through the Lens of Whiteness, Challenging Racialized Imagery in Pop Culture. It's a really important conversation, and their book acts as a wide open invitation into that conversation, whether that is something you already have built awareness around, or if you're totally new to that conversation. Today, we get to hear some stories from Liz and Diane's own lives and work through one of the examples of racialized imagery from their book. My hope is that you can learn something today, something you can take with you and begin to practice in the rest of your life. I know for me, a lot of the things that I got to speak about with Diane and Liz are definitely sticking with me. So let's continue our conversation with Liz and Diane. I would love to kind of walk through a little bit about what you're doing in your book by talking about what you've already referenced, that Dove ad. It's the first example that's used in your book, not to give too much away, but to give people who are, maybe have some awareness, have some curiosity, but are still maybe not quite sure what you mean by racialized images in pop culture. Because again, maybe that's a new conversation for people to have. But yeah, can you kind of walk us through what your thought processes are and what are the questions that you're asking when you see an advertisement like the Dove ad? And please start by explaining to people what this ad was. What are the questions to be asking around that? And what's the work that you're kind of prompting people to do in your book as you bring this ad up?
One of the images that we talk about, yes, is this Dove ad. I think it's from 2017. It released on social media as a way to advertise one of their new product lines. I think it was some sort of body wash or something. And the image, it was a video originally, and the video had a Black woman, young woman, who was supposedly, using the product, and she starts to kind of lift up her shirt. And as she lifts up her shirt, there's a lighter colored shirt underneath it. She was wearing kind of a dark brown shirt. She's lifting up the shirt and she pulls it over her head. And as she pulls it over her head, the lighter tan colored shirt is revealed beneath. And all of a sudden, instead of this young Black woman, it becomes this young white woman with red hair. And their message, their intention of this ad was to be about how their products are for all skin types. But the way that they decided to tell that message was incredibly problematic. Because if you know the history and the context, and even if you don't, you probably know something's off with that choice as to how they demonstrated using the product. And when you know the history of soap advertisements and racism in this country, you come to understand that there is a long message around washing Black skin clean. That Black skin is dirty, and that with the right soap and scrubbing enough, you can have white skin. I mean, that is, and I'll have Diane get into some of the real history around it. But that is part of the imagery that we as a U.S. culture, as an American culture, have had around for decades. And when Dove decided to do this ad, it's amazing that nobody saw, this storyboard as problematic. Now, it obviously had a lot of backlash, and people called them out on it right away. And their first apology wasn't really an apology. And they said, we missed the mark. And the question is, well, what mark were you really going for to begin with? Mm-hmm. They eventually pulled it. I will say, as a brand and a company, just like as human beings. They have tried to do better since then, and they have crowdsourced images. They have crowdsourced ads in going forward to not have these mistakes and missteps. But the point is, it's a lesson in how our subconscious minds as white people might be perpetuating some of these myths and these racist conventions without realizing it, and we can do a lot better. So the book itself overall is a guide and a tool and a resource to teach people how to analyze these images, and when we see them in our day-to-day life, just to be a little bit more critical and a little bit more aware as to what's the story that they're telling, and what is it rooted in, and is it problematic. But I'll let Diane kind of talk a little bit more to the history of these soap ads, because it really does make that Dove ad even more problematic.
I was going to say, because you could just look at the ad and, like you said, kind of be like, oh, that feels icky. But the context is so important to know that that's not just some feeling you have. That is rooted in this deep history and this deep context.
Yeah, that I think people aren't consciously aware of.
Right.
But it's somewhere. That's where the icky feeling comes from, right?
Yes.
Like, there's something. Yeah. There's something going on. But yeah, and I feel like even more than decades, I mean, I don't want to say centuries, because that seems a little too long, but I mean, maybe for 100 years or 150 years or something like that. So, and the other thing we did in the book is we didn't just show the ad that we were just talking about, but we showed some of those older ads as well, where the little kid says to the other kid, like, how come your mama doesn't wash you with, Ivory soap or whatever it is. And then another image where they're, the Black kid is getting like scrubbed and they're turning white. Right. And so, I mean, even the names of soaps, like, why is soap called Ivory? Come on now. Right. So I think that history is important. And, again, other layers. Right. So do we have to have like an all white group of people making decisions? Or we have to crowdsource, like, what's something in the middle where you should have a diverse group of employees in your company who also feel safe to say something to you like, this storyboard is ridiculous. This is what's going to happen to you when you publish this ad. You are going to be eviscerated, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I can't remember the story, but my student Roz was telling me a story about a friend of hers who works in a similar kind of company. And, he's in the room, the storyboard is there, it's completely racist and egregious, but he's like, yeah, I'm the only one in here, and I know how these people are, and if I say something, it's gonna, it's gonna hurt me, and it's gonna be problematic, and they're not gonna listen anyway, and, all of the stuff. And so then it, like, they made it self-preservation decision to not say anything. And so, I mean, again, all of this stuff is braided together, right? Like, who's in the room, who is hired, who is, and then on the other side, like, what are the impacts of seeing many, many images throughout the day, many of which have these kind of undertones that we're not aware of. And the soap ad is low-hanging fruit, because some people do know about that. And they also know about the other Dove ad with the 3 women, right? And so it's like before and after, and the dark-skinned woman is at the before, and then there's a sort of a Latina woman, like mid, and then the white person is under the after. And so they were already got in trouble for that. The reason I wanted to mention that ad too is that and in the picture is like crinkly, bad skin is the before, and then you use the product, and after, your skin is smooth. But because of where the women are placed, there's a different message of before and after, and worse, right? So the other reason I wanted to mention that ad was, for me, when I first looked at it, I was like, yeah, okay. And I saw what I just mentioned to you. But the other thing is with these images, and we found this multiple times in our work, like the more you look, the more you see.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start thinking about it. And so the other thing that I didn't notice it at first, but then a little bit later, I was like, wait, also the before woman is heavier. The middle woman is, a little slimmer, and then the white woman is slim and sort of typical American, what we consider beautiful in America. Right. So there's layers to the images, and so there's, you have to look at them for a while. You can't just glance at it and be like, okay, here's the analysis. Like, you have to sit with it for a while. To see what's going on. I don't know, Liz, did I miss part of something that was important there about the history?
No, that was great.
I think the language that's coming to my mind, which I know is often used around conversations of race, specifically with like microaggressions, is a conversation of intent versus impact. Mm-hmm. And I can see that that's where a lot of people maybe like stumble trying to get into this conversation, is that they want to talk about intent when really the meaning is made in the impact side of things. And I think what you're doing is actually helping people to understand that relationship a little better, because I think you could look at a company making a choice like the ads you've just explained, and then when they do get attacked, they want to, back themselves into the corner and be like, well, that wasn't our intent. That wasn't our intent. And okay, maybe that is true on their conscious level, what they were aware of, because maybe they don't have a deep awareness. And still the impact has hit people in the way that it has, because there is this context, this history around a lot of these conversations. And so at the same time that you could say, okay, your intent might not have been to do that, but the impact was, I think you, through your book, talking about a lens of whiteness or white ways of seeing, you're saying your conscious intent was not to do this, but it's still baked into like the choices that you made all along the way. And that's what we need to like break down. And so I think you giving people language to say, look at this image. Let's go through all the things that we see here. Here's all the problematic ways of seeing that are in this image. It's like giving people language on the back end to look at ads that already exists, so that we can bring that language to the front end as we continue to make ads in the future or put images out in our own social media or in our own worlds, to be conscious of that on the intent side, because we understand the impact side.
That's really important. And we actually wrestled with this and had to talk about this, because we have to say multiple times, like, we don't know what the creator's intention were, or sometimes we don't know who the creator was, but maybe most times.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter, because just like you said, white ways of seeing, you can read these things in the image, regardless of what somebody's intent is, because that history is there.
Yeah.
Right, and is there to be read and interpreted. And so it's also relevant whether someone sees the ad and is like, this is screwed up and here's the history and we're going to protest, or whether you just see it, take it in, don't consciously notice anything about it, and then it just shapes your reality, one more shaping, one more moving into a certain direction.
Yeah.
And so, either way, it's important.
Anything you want to add to that, Liz?
Yeah, I think building off of something that you said, Abbie, regarding the intent versus impact, and when we have these moments of realization that our best laid intentions are not having the impact that we hoped, I think it's really easy for us to target a corporation or a company and say, do better. But we have to remember that each of these, giant corporations are made up of individual people.
Right. Yes.
And I love the quote. It's Maya Angelou's quote along the lines, and I might not get it exactly right, but it's like, do the best that you can until you know better. And then once you know better, do better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're trying to do throughout this book and
Right.
throughout this whole project, because we know as white people, we're not getting it right all the time. We make mistakes. That's a huge part of the book, is to share our stories of our missteps and how we didn't know better until we did. And now we're trying to do better. And I think, again, as white people, like we tend to react more on the defensive side.
Yes.
That, well, you don't understand what my intent was, and I'm not a racist. And so I think a lot of white people are more concerned about being called a racist than if their actions actually were racist.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so the Dove ad, the soap ads are one fraction of an example of how this is so woven into our daily lives, and everything that we consume and produce is just seeped in white supremacy and this white lens. And the awareness is a constant sort of I don't know, like peeling. We use the analogy of like peeling back the layers of an onion, because like Diane said just a moment ago, you can look at an image once and notice something is wrong. And then you can come back to it and notice something again, and then stare at it for a little bit longer, and then put it away and come back to it a couple weeks later and continue to understand more and do better the next time that you're either looking at it or creating an image yourself. And so the long-term impact of each of our individual work can have a ripple effect, because we're only one person, but the conversations that we have around this, I know, are already impacting people. And even when I was just doing this research sort of informally, like while I was in school, I was talking about it with friends and family. And they started picking up on, oh, you know what? I was looking at my company's website the other day, and I realized all of our stock images, they're all of white people. And I never would have noticed that before. I never would have picked up on that. And so that is acknowledging, right, that until they had this awareness to look for something, they didn't even notice it. So that's already informing them about their white privilege.
Yeah.
And now they know better. And so now they're doing better. And the next step is, okay, then what voice do you have to make a change about that? What seat at the table do you need to get to make a change? And how is that reflective of the actual politics and infrastructure and hiring practice? Like it just has this ripple effect. But it can start with you as an individual and recognizing this really powerful dynamic of intent versus impact.
It's exciting to hear that, your own curiosity about this was able to spark conversations with other people to create awareness and curiosity in them as well. However, I know that that's not everybody's story, that they might be on a similar path as you and be developing their own awareness and curiosity and try to invite people in and have people not be responsive to that. It does sound like a very tedious thing to do, to say, well, look at every single image you encounter. I know that's not exactly what you're saying, but we encounter so many images in our life. And so to ask people to say, think critically about every image you're looking at, I could imagine that a lot of people are like dismissive of that. Say, oh, that sounds really tedious. Surely we don't need to do that. You're being sensitive. You're taking everything too seriously by wanting to pay attention to all of this. What I said earlier, like minutia, and it's like small things that are actually really big things. I don't mean to like devalue it in that way, but it's small details that mean a lot. And so I'm curious what you would say to people, or what you can say that you offered in your book to people who are encountering others who are dismissive of paying attention to the things that you are asking people to pay attention to in your book.
Well, I can start with a story
Please.
that I do share in the book. And this happened while I was on vacation a few years back with some friends and family. And we were traveling through Wisconsin, and we were in this small town by a lake and had some lunch, and we were walking along the water and some of the shops and restaurants. And there was a statue in this sort of little pavilion area. And the statue was of a Potawatomi chief. And we were in the area of Wisconsin where the Potawatomi tribe was the most prevalent and still has a presence there. And one of the women that I was with saw the statue and she ran up to it and she put her arm around the statue and she was smiling and laughing and posing. And another friend of mine got out her phone and started taking pictures. And the woman with her arm around the statue, she leaned over and kissed the statue. And I was watching this all unfold in the matter of seconds, minutes, really. And in my mind, I was thinking that this is problematic. So they took the pictures, they were laughing and all of that. And I said something to them. I said, do you realize what you just did? You entered into a space that is honoring or trying to commemorate the people whose land we are currently on, this land has been transformed into a capitalistic nature of restaurants and cafes, and there's boats and all of these things, and you entered that space in a way that was so just entitled and using it for your own, I guess, entertainment, right? To pose for a picture because of how you associated with that statue as a fun tourist attraction, and completely erasing the history and the atrocity and the violence against what that statue and a Potawatomi chief represents. And I did not put it in those terms, let me say, like I did just now, but I tried to say, I don't think, you realize what you just did, and what are you going to do with those pictures? And they were dismissive. They thought I'm being too serious. I'm being overly sensitive. They're just trying to have fun and we're on vacation, and what harm was done, right? And I think that that's a common reaction. I think a lot of people would question my sense that there was something wrong in that moment, that it's my problem.
Yes, right. The person pointing out the problem, it's maybe easier to call them the problem than actually look at the real problem.
Right. Yeah. It's like, gosh, Liz, not everything is about race and ethnicity and these issues that you are bringing up. And again, that is a privilege to say that, because just because race isn't affecting your life every day doesn't mean it's not a real issue. That is a white privilege perspective. So those moments, I think, are pretty common among white people. And that's where Diane and I wrestle with this in the book of like, we are white people. We are writing about whiteness. We are centering whiteness in targeting white people. It's problematic because we could be missing the point in the same argument that we're trying to point out. We might be missing something as well. And yet we know how important it is for white people to be called into this work. And sometimes hearing it from another white person is one way to do that. And understanding that the defensiveness, the dismissiveness is part of that unlearning and that awareness building for each individual journey. It does mean that it's our job as well to notice and make sense of that with each conversation that we have, because it's going to be different for each person.
I was just going to say, I wish there was an easy answer to that question, right? I mean, sometimes people choose not to say anything. They can be judged, because you can definitely be judged by people of color, by Black people, for that's another privilege, right? To like, you think something's wrong, but you don't want your white friends to get mad at you, so you don't say anything. Whereas oftentimes Black people feel like, I have to speak up because this is not right. And if I don't say something, it just allows it to be perpetuated. And, they don't appreciate the sort of white people in the room who are not saying anything. And then later, I mean, I think we've all heard these kinds of stories so many times, right? And then later on, the white person comes up and is like, oh, I'm so sorry. That was so terrible. What happened? And it's like, okay, but you could have said something, right? think it's complicated. I mean, I definitely had students who have taken critical whiteness studies, and then I had one kid who I remember very well. He was from Boston. He was the son of a Irish police officer. I mean, I was actually really surprised that he took the class, and this was some years ago. I feel like if this had happened now, like, things are so polarized that maybe, you wouldn't be telling the same story. So, he learned a lot in the class, and his perspective started shifting, right? And so then when he goes home for Thanksgiving or whatever it is and starts trying to talk to his family, he's like, no one believed me. No one would listen to me. Everyone was mad at me. And, whenever I tried to say something, they didn't understand. And I was like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the reality of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. And, I'm sure we talked about it, and we talked about, perspectives are shifting, and, you try to say the things that you can, but you don't have a magic wand.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish we had magic wands, and because I would definitely be putting mine to use, but you have to just do what you can do and take it step by step, and be observant in the situation. I mean, a lot of times you can do the kinds of things that anti-racist work will talk about, which is ask people if they can think about where they first learned about certain things, or where they first get them to tell stories about their own experiences, and that may jog them a little, because it keeps them grounded in their own experiences, and in sort of a storytelling mode and things like that. But I mean, I think someone sitting on a podcast saying, well, here's what you do, step 1, step 2, step 3,
right.
You're trying to talk to people who have a quite different perspective and way of seeing things, and during a time of polarization like we have right now. I mean, I think things are quite different than they were 10 or however many years ago, and so you have to be realistic and be aware, but that doesn't mean you don't take risks. That doesn't mean you don't speak up. It doesn't mean but you need to pay attention, be observant, be curious, understand people are coming from a different place, start where people are. I mean, that's those are the kinds of sort of easy sounding ideas. Like, yeah, okay, start where you are. Okay, yay.
Yeah, Diane, you're getting at something good that I was wanting to bring up, is that for us to sit here, and be like, it's hard, it's challenging. That's not to say, so don't do it. It's to say, this is the reality of it. So if you're trying to do it and it feels hard, you're doing it right. To kind of say, like, this is the reality of it. Because, we can sit here and be like, oh, it's so hard. So uncomfortable to have these conversations with people. It makes me feel so icky. But it's like, what's really actually hard? Racism, and experiencing racism and injustices and inequity and microaggressions every day. Like, that's what's really hard. And so for us to say, oh, these conversations are hard, it's kind of a different kind of hard. And I think it's one of those where it's like, this is the kind of thing where we're like, okay, it's a challenge to have these conversations with certain people. And it's a challenge that is worth it, again, because we can't just stop at awareness, and we can't even just stop at curiosity. It has to be like action beyond that. And how do we, once we have an awareness, once we build a curiosity, how do we act as a result of that? And I think, Liz, your story is important to talk about your friends and the way that they interact with that statue, and you asking them, well, what are you going to do with that image? Because it's easy to be like, oh, this is a conversation for that, like, companies should be having. When we're talking about like the Dove ad, which is a great example, or a lot of the other examples in your book are like, look at this magazine ad, and here's all the like racialized ways that this image is functioning right now. And that is, part of the conversation, but we're not, totally absolved if you're an individual who's not on a marketing team in a Fortune 500 company. It's happening in your life too. And those images matter just as much as the images that millions of people are going to see. Because like you said, the organizations are made up of the people, and all the people in all the world, we could talk about the United States, other people in the United States, and the way that we relate to images. And it matters not just for big marketing strategies and brand deals and things. It matters for our own images that we put out into the world, and worth a little bit of the self-reflection. It's not just, here are these tools so you can call out the companies you see using racialized images.
Yeah. And I just kind of wanted to tie it back to, your overarching theme here, because images tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
Every picture tells a story.
Mhm.
And what we try to kind of end the book on is whose story is being told.
Yeah.
And so if you are taking a picture and you're posting it on social media, whose story are you telling?
Mm.
Did you take a picture of yourself doing some volunteer work and you took pictures of some of the maybe homeless folks that are coming through to the soup kitchen that you served at? Why are you posting that? Whose story is being represented? I guarantee you it's not that person's story that you just took a picture of. This is about you, and this is about your story. And that's problematic, to be using somebody else's image and their situation in their life to tell a story about who you are, or how you want to be perceived by others. And so, yes, we can attack the kind of advertisements, the mass media out there, but this work can also be done on an individual day-to-day level of questioning whose voice is being heard. Do I have the right to tell this person's story? And what is the story that I'm telling myself about myself?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a lot of posturing and a lot of self-branding that happens.
Yes.
That's pretty much all social media is. And I think social media has done a lot of good in the world. And, we wouldn't have had the Arab Spring without Twitter, right? But obviously there's a lot of issues with social media. And when you add pictures and images and video into the mix, we just are trying to move the needle a little bit on being better at not perpetuating some of these really, really problematic conventions and stereotypes, and taking away somebody's ability to tell their own story.
I think the frame of storytelling is great because, people will be familiar with the little phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words, or, what you're getting at, that a picture is telling a story. Because again, with I don't know where to start, maybe that some people are feeling with this conversation. It's that if you're looking at an image, you don't necessarily have to have all kinds of fancy language to be able to be like, what is at play here? What are the meanings? What are the cultural histories and narratives and context? But you could just start with the question of what story is being told here. And I'd say the follow-up question of what stories are not being told here, because the stories that are not told affect us just as much as the stories that are told in a different way. And so it's like, if you can bring that question with you and use that, you talk about a lens of whiteness. I like to talk about a communication lens or a communication perspective. And I'm always visualizing like glasses or something that you're putting on this lens, and that's what you're choosing to look through. Like if I took off my glasses right now, what I would see would be very different. So I'm choosing this lens. It's affecting what I see in front of me. And so I'm thinking, like, if you're walking around with your little like magnifying glass that represents what stories are being told and what stories are not being told question, you're just lifting it up and looking through it at everything that you're seeing in the world. Because then you can develop, I think maybe that's part of where the awareness can be built, is by asking that question at all, if you weren't asking that question before.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be conscious of our time, so I think we should be wrapping up. But are there any other thoughts, feelings, ideas that you wanted to share today, either of you?
I feel like we got at a lot of the things that I was hoping we would talk about. Liz, how about you?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we covered a lot. And it also feels like I could surely talk to you all for at least 3 more hours. You have a whole 200-page book on the topic. It's like you said, it's lifelong work. It's us inching collectively as a society, as individuals, toward this better social world we imagine for ourselves. It's trying to undo the meaning making that we haven't recognized in the past, make better meaning in the future. It is the tedious work of looking at images and asking what stories are being told. And people maybe don't feel like they have the energy for that or the time or the desire to do that. But I think we're all just here to encourage people and say it is worth it to do that work.
Abbie, I think what I would say to people if they were saying that is, you're seeing the image anyway. You've already seen it, and you're already telling a story about the image, but you're just not conscious of it. So the extra step is, being conscious and thinking about, is that story the story that I want to go with, and I want to believe unknowingly.
Yeah, that's like the only thing we're saying is bring the unconscious, the subconscious to the conscious, and then, hey, you go from there if you're happy with the story that's being told, or if there is some rethinking that needs to be done there. Yeah. Well, I appreciate both of you and your time today, and the fact that you've put in the work to create this book and start these conversations for so many people and keep them going in your own lives. And it just feels important. And I appreciate you as people that are inching us toward that better social world. It seems clear to me that you're dedicated to that goal.
We are. It's a slow process, but we are.
Yeah. Thank you for the conversation, Abbie, and for the work that you're doing as well, because I think that this is how change happens. It is these conversations. Yes, it can happen on a large scale, but I think we have to remember the connection and the stories that we're telling each other around these things that we can hold each other accountable for, and Diane and I have done that for several years now, and we continue, and the work is never done. So appreciate the conversation and the chance to talk with you about these things too.
Yeah. Thank you both. I appreciate it. Okay, that is all for our conversation with Liz and Diane, but I'd encourage you to pre-order their book, which comes out October 31st. You can find it in the link in the description. It's, again, such a beautiful invitation to all of us into this very important work, and a great way to continue this conversation in our own lives. The next turns I would like to offer you, now that we have concluded part 1 and part 2 of our conversation with Diane and Liz, are to consider the questions at the top of the description. They are, what is the intent and what is the impact? Where do we start? And what story is being told here? And what stories are not being told here? I think these are great questions to kind of keep in your back pocket, if you will, and use them, ask them at any moment when you're trying to understand a situation better. They really help us to take on that communication perspective, think about the stories being told, and the meaning that it has for us and for others. As always, I am supported by the CMM Institute for Personal and Social Evolution. This podcast is just one of many, many initiatives designed with the goal of helping walk us one step closer toward better social worlds. So I am proud to be a part of that work. Finally, some additional podcast-specific next turns are, as always, to share this episode with someone you want to invite into the conversation. And please feel free to also keep the conversation going by reaching out to me. You can do that through email, through the website, or Instagram and YouTube. You can find links to all those in the description. I'll look forward to hearing from you and continuing this conversation. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being curious, and thank you for being a part of this story. I'm Abbie, and this has been Stories Lived, Stories Told.